This is a Squiz podcast. We're your shortcut to being informed. The weekly wrap is the week in news and what's coming up. I'm Kate Watson.
And I'm Claire Kimball.
A big development in the Menendez Brothers saga, if you're following that one. Also, the Queensland election is today. We'll explain the whole abortion issue because it's something we've put on the back burner and intended to explain in this episode. So we'll do that for you. And then there's Richard White.
Yep, he's the Aussie billionaire. It's been a big story this week, come to a bit of an end for him at WiseTech. The biggest story, though, the royal visit, and someone who wasn't that happy about it.
We're going to kick off the podcast a little differently today. The most clicked link out of our Squiz Today newsletter this week was overwhelmingly about what the best chocolate is. It's a hot topic of debate.
Well, I can understand that. It's a very serious topic.
It's a very serious issue.
People take their chocolate very seriously.
I have views.
You have strong views.
You have views?
I do. Like, I'm not a chocolate fiend. I have many food faults. Chocolate is not one of them.
It's sad for you. Because you can't have chocolate with peanuts in it.
Yeah, that's
Which
true.
is some of the best chocolate.
It is some of the best chocolate. I can do a good roasted almond. That's okay.
You can do that. Okay,
Yeah.
That is a good chocolate. Anyway, the point being, our producer would like us to do a taste test.
Yeah.
She set up a taste test for us live in the studio. We are going to try and pick what the number one chocolate was as per this article, which I think was a collation of journalists who did a test?
Yeah,
or
so
was it like something more scientific?
Oh,
than that?
no, not particularly scientific. The Guardian does these wonderful taste tests. Probably some of my favourites have been in the potato chip category.
Of course.
However, we're into milk chocolate from the Guardian this week. So they absolutely have their number one. Let's give that, or we don't know what the number one is. Well, we don't know.
So we've got three options in front of us.
The winner, one of the bottom ones, and something in the middle.
Okay, so should we start with, we'll eat the one at the same time?
Yep, start with number one. Right. We don't know what that one is. They're all chopped up.
I don't know about like chewing noises on a podcast. I don't know about that.
It's new for us. All right, got that one.
It's definitely Cadbury. Number one's Cadbury.
Yeah, that's dairy milk.
That's
sure.
Cadbury dairy milk.
Okay. All right.
Delicious. Also, just have a sip of my coffee. Drinking noises, even more of a turn off.
I'm on to number two.
Oh, maybe that's Cadbury dairy milk.
That's quite nice, actually, isn't it?
Maybe
I was sure
they all taste like Cadbury.
Yeah, that tastes a lot like Cadbury. I still think number one was
Yeah, I feel like that's
milk.
a cheapo one, that second one.
Okay. That's quite nice, though. Quite enjoyed that.
I like a chocolate in the morning.
Number three.
Number three. I'm so confused now.
That's a nice one, too. It's almost got like a minty kind of flavour to it.
Yeah, but I don't like it. But I think it's probably going to be the best one.
Now, you eat Aldi.
I love Aldi chocolate, but I have
Which one is it?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a problem.
Okay,
They're actually all very similar.
Consensus agreement is that when you don't know what you're eating, they all taste the same.
I think number one was dairy milk.
I think it was too.
The other two, I'm not sure.
All right, Annalise.
So number 3 was Aldi chocolate,
Yeah.
my favourite.
Okay. Yeah.
Number 2 was Tony's, which was in the
Yeah, the number two tasted a little bit average.
I haven't tried Tony's before.
So the outcome, regardless of all of this, is that Aldi chocolate is apparently the best chocolate. Also, I think one of the cheapest.
Yes, and dairy milk was down the bottom.
Oh.
Actually, like that really upsets me because I do like Cadbury dairy milk.
Yeah, and I really liked it during that taste test.
There you go.
There you go. Anyway, if you want to try it for yourself, that's a fun little activity to do at home. I've actually done that game with wine. Which was, as you can imagine, a lot more fun.
Full glasses only.
Yeah, it was about an argument with my husband about price points.
Okay.
And why I needed to buy wine that was $30 a bottle because he thinks it tastes the same as a $10 bottle, and I disagreed.
And Sam's a bit of an evidence-based guy, so you needed to do that for sure.
All I can say is it got more difficult the more wine you drank. On to the biggest story of the week. It was King Charles and Queen Camilla's visit to Sydney and Canberra that really led the news this week. For a couple in their 70s, Claire, they pushed through, didn't they? They did a fair bit.
It was an action-packed Monday and Tuesday, that's for sure. So in Canberra, there was a ceremony honouring fallen Australians at the Australian War Memorial, a visit to the National Botanic Gardens. It was the visit, though, to Parliament House that really got international headlines. That, of course, was down to that outburst by the Indigenous Senator Lidia Thorpe.
Some listening this will be the first time they've heard of Lidia Thorpe. What happened was that reception was at the Great Hall. If you've been to Parliament House, you've probably been in the Great Hall. It's just through the Marble Hall entrance. It has a huge tapestry at one end. It's like a really big space, and noise really carries, particularly in this instance.
Noise really does carry. So first of all, it just bears saying that she's an independent senator from Victoria. She was a Green and she split with the Greens over the Green stance on the voice referendum. She wanted the Greens to go harder on their stance. So she now advocates for the black sovereignty movement. As Charles finished his speech on Monday at the reception, she approached the stage and she was yelling, "This is not your country."
Yeah, she shouted things like, "You committed genocide, give us our land back, give us a treaty," for example. Those pictures went around the world last week.
Absolutely, they did. And we knew that because when we do our news run in the afternoon, we get across all the international sites, and it was actually very prominent from America through Europe and particularly in the United Kingdom. So it went everywhere. Some were really upset about it, those people who were attending in Parliament House, but others were a bit more circumspect. I particularly liked Dick Smith's take on it. He's a guy with an opinion or two. What he said, though, is it's a wonderful part of our democracy that she's not going to be put in jail.
I don't know how tongue-in-cheek that was, or I'm not sure.
No, I think it was pretty genuine. But it really just bears to say a lot of attention this week, a lot of the commentary around the Royals' visit was about that incident.
Yeah, Peter Dutton, the coalition leader, called on her to resign after that outburst on Monday. He said, and this is his quote, "There's a very strong argument for somebody who doesn't believe in the system but is willing to take $250,000 a year from the system to resign on principle." Thorpe told him essentially to get nicked.
Yep.
The story didn't end there, though, and possibly why it became one of the biggest stories of the week was on Wednesday, Thorpe was asked about the contradiction of swearing an oath to the Queen when she entered Parliament. She insinuated that she deliberately stuffed that up when she did it.
That was a sort of nudge to that. What she said is, if you listen close enough, it wasn't her heirs, Heirs, it was her hairs.
So because you have to swear allegiance to the Queen's heirs.
Yes, her hairs that I was giving my allegiance to.
The story goes on. This raises questions about her eligibility to be in Parliament because I guess the insinuation there is that, to use the word insinuation twice, is that if you don't take the oath properly, can you actually be in Parliament? This seemed to scare Lidia Thorpe a little bit. She backtracked quite a bit from that. She said her mispronunciation was a mistake. The coalition aren't letting up, though.
No, they're really not. So they want the Senate to take a look at her validity to sit in the Parliament. We're kind of in uncharted waters here. I don't know that anyone in the past...
It kind of reminds me of like the citizenship, the whole debacle.
It kind of, except that's a very clear line on the sand. You're either eligible to sit in Parliament or not, but not taking the oath appropriately is a whole other question. So the coalition is really pushing into that. Labor, not so much. Senator Katie Gallagher, who is a very senior senator for the Labor Party, she says that they're open to discussing options to censure or discipline Thorpe over that outburst, but they haven't said a whole lot about her eligibility as such.
But this one might continue to be a news story.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Yeah.
That's the whole context there. Day 2 was less shouty. There was a barbecue in Western Sydney, a visit to the Melanoma Institute, a meeting with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community representatives, a visit to a community housing project. They were busy.
Yep.
A visit to Oz Harvest.
Yeah.
All in one day.
That's before we get to Sydney Harbour, the Navy and the Opera House. The theme before they got to that sort of crescendo, I guess, was to focus attention on, they said, the important work being done in our community to improve the lives of everyday Australians.
My favourite part of the whole thing was evidence that they'd had a big day by Camilla taking her shoes off at one point to walk up the stairs.
Yeah.
She had obviously a bit of an issue with her heels.
Yeah, at the end of the day, taking her shoes off, those stairs up to Admiralty House are really quite something as well. She kicked off her shoes. We've all been there.
We've all been there. It just felt so relatable. I loved that. It's all about Choggum now. You have talked, and Alice, extensively about Choggum in the Squiz Today podcast, and no doubt it'll be news across the weekend. The Royals, along with our Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, are in Samoa for that meeting. The parts that those people are involved in kicked off yesterday and will wind up today.
Yep, exactly right. Lots of talk about climate change and whether Australia should be taking a bigger role of leadership when it comes to those sorts of issues. So stay tuned for that.
We talked last week, Claire, about whether they were going to dress down. Did that happen?
They did dress down, that's for sure, but no sort of great moment of loud, funny, tropical style shirts and people lining up in a row. Sort of more like a white tunic kind of number.
Yeah. Crocs?
No Crocs to be seen. But there was a pig. The king did get given a pig.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can't take it home, but there was a nice gesture.
I was going to say. All right, there you go. All right, the Queensland election is today, Claire. Abortion has oddly been an issue in this election. And we have thought about talking about it each and every week for the last 3 episodes, and we thought we'd save it for the actual day of voting to give some clarity on what's actually gone down. I say oddly because I don't think anyone thought before it started that this would be something that would dominate the campaign.
Yeah, we're not America, so abortion isn't an issue that really comes up for debate very often. And this debate is quite confusing because there's all sorts of people involved. There's previous stances, there's legislation and private members' bills and all sorts of stuff, and previously held positions by the people involved. So let's unpack it.
Yeah, the person and the protagonist at the heart of this story is a guy called Robbie Katter. He's the son of Bob Katter. He is an independent member of the Queensland Parliament. He is a very safe seat, so he will be re-elected again unless... I'll eat my shorts if he doesn't get re-elected because there's sort of no way he won't be.
You heard it here first.
And I think the point being that he will be part of the next Parliament makeup.
Yep.
And that's important to note because he was the one who suggested back in early October that after the election he wanted to introduce a bill around abortion laws. The complication for the LNP, the Liberal National Party, has been that when abortion laws were amended last time, they were given a conscience vote, with most opting to vote against decriminalising abortion. That was the most recent debate about abortion in the Parliament. That included LNP leader David Crisafulli.
Yeah, and that was quite recent too. So it was 2018 that vote on decriminalising abortion in Queensland happened. The vote passed, so abortion has been decriminalised there. But it hasn't really been an issue since until Katter raised this prospect of reopening it again. So David Crisafulli this time around, the LNP leader, he says that he has changed his stance, that he doesn't want abortion to be a criminal act. So that's his position, and he's been trying for days, weeks
now
to say that and to be clear about it. The tricky issue for him, though, is that he has colleagues who still feel very strongly about it and perhaps would like the opportunity to recriminalise it again. So if we get into a new parliament and the LNP is in power, the question that's been lingering is, would something happen?
And the thing about where we are as we come to election day is this has simmered quite a lot. And this is a bit in the detail, but what's happened since is that Robbie Katter has said, actually, I don't really want to have a conversation about decriminalising abortion. What I want to have a conversation about is a private member's bill that he tried to introduce last year, which was about the fact that if you have it was about for him mandating care if it's aborted late term but still shows signs of life. So he wants to mandate that doctors need to show a duty of care. Doctors' associations around Queensland say we already need to do that. There's no point mandating it, but that's his whole thing is he wants to have that conversation. There isn't even much evidence that's even a problem.
Yeah.
And there also isn't even much evidence that he would get that private member's bill up to begin with.
Yeah, lots of ifs.
Lots of ifs and buts.
But it's been a big cloud over the campaign that's been very difficult to fight through because it is quite nuanced and technical in parts.
We hope we've made it clear as mud for you.
We've had a go.
The other thing that's been a more of a late bloomer, I guess, has been the issue of free lunches.
Yeah, so Stephen Miles, who's the Labor Premier there, he's announced as part of Labor policy in this campaign that state primary schools all kids there would get free lunches. If he's re-elected, it's going to cost $1.4 billion. It's a lot of money.
It's interesting. It's not about like feeding kids really. It's about
nutrition or obesity or any of those things.
It's a cost of living measure.
Yeah.
So he says that it'll save families $1,600 a year. His opponents say, sure, but what about the $1.4 billion in taxpayer funds that you need to fund it? Finally, on this one, I always reckon it's good to have some talking points going into election night.
Absolutely.
We will both be tuning into the coverage. Polls are saying that it's time for a change in Queensland, that it looks like the LNP could even get a majority government. 2 seats to keep an eye on, Rockhampton and Mackay. They've been Labor seats for 100 years, I think, in the case of Rocky, and all but about 4 of the last 100 years in the case of Mackay. They might change, so they'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah, they sure will. If seats like those are falling away from Labor, then you probably know they've lost.
Interesting also in the context of a federal election, because those tend to be seats that swing
Yeah,
in a federal election.
Indeed.
So popcorn ready. I will be texting you. Richard White, Claire, the billionaire a lot of people had no idea existed until these last few weeks.
So you and I have been talking for weeks now about this case.
You have.
Because, well, I have, yeah.
You've been talking at me about it.
It's become a bit of a soap opera, and
Yeah.
I was quite enjoying getting to sort of bed, getting into bed, getting the tablet out. I know this isn't probably
Everyone
good sleep
does this.
hygiene.
Yeah.
And having a read of what the latest story is before it was sort of popping up in the morning, because it became like this sort of serialised soap opera of claims of what was coming out, a drip feed of disaster for him. Just to go backwards, he's a hugely successful founder of a software tech company called WiseTech. It's in supply chain logistics. They're rock stars when it comes to tech in Australia. They're the biggest tech company listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. His personal stake in that is about a third of the company, which gives him about $10 billion in wealth.
Well, until this week.
So hardly a household name, but a superstar in the Australian business scene, which is why it's all blown up now into the mainstream.
Yeah, so what happened was a few $1 billion has been wiped off his net worth, that $10 billion, because of a scandal that he finds himself in. Let us catch you up. This started as an affair, and then a big falling out between Linda Rogan, who I'd also never heard of, a wellness entrepreneur, and Richard White. He'd bought Rogan a $13 million home in Sydney's eastern suburbs. Then when his wife found out, who in a quirk had actually been the person that introduced them, but I don't know how deep we need to go on that. Get into bed and read your tablet if you really want to go deep on that. But she'd introduced them. It all went south though.
Yeah, he didn't give her the home. He was renting it to her while also paying her $1 million a year and taking a stake in her business. Anyway, the wife found out. She was asked to give her keys back to the home. The business deal fell over. It ended up in court, and again, we won't go into the details of that, but essentially it was a dispute over $90,000 worth of furniture that was purchased for that home. White actually took her on to try and recover the cost of that furniture. That's what put it into the public sphere.
Yeah, so a lot of details came out about how that exchange had been handled, and then more women came forward accusing White of, for example, crude language on LinkedIn, of bullying. Then there were accusations of governance issues, including a number of other purchases made where White bought or intended to buy homes for women he had relationships with. All in all, the thing about this one is no one is actually saying he's done anything illegal, but the reputation of White and WiseTech has taken a huge blow, so much so that late this week he resigned as CEO.
Yeah, so there's that reputation part of it, and also claims of how he's conducted himself. There were questions, and probably still some ongoing questions, about whether he's used company money for stuff and whether his behaviour at work has been appropriate. So there's still some questions there, but yeah, pushed out. He's no longer the CEO. He's going to be maintaining his salary though, $1 million a year, and he'll be consulting to them after taking a break.
I guess also
He'll still have his stake in the company.
He'll still have his stake in the company. The fascinating thing about Richard White as well is that, and what we haven't mentioned, is he's also just a real character. So he started off as an engineer, guitar engineer for AC/DC, and built this business entirely himself. So there's so much interest in him as a person on top of all of that.
Lives with his mum in Bexley, in the home that he grew up in. And there's a couple of mates that live with them as well.
To my earlier point, no one really knew about him if you weren't sort of a hardcore business consumer. He's 70.
Yeah.
I thought he must be in his 40s, but he's been around for a really long time. Anyway, Richard White, that's that story. We'll leave that one there.
Yep.
The final one we wanted to mention was on yesterday morning, there was a big development in the Menendez case. You recently recommended the show on Netflix. I'm sure lots of people listening have been watching that. I haven't.
Yep.
But you are telling me that this is a big development.
A big development. So Monsters was the Netflix show.
I will watch it.
Remember we talked about it's pretty grim.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty
I know, but I just, now that it's a whole thing.
Yeah. And then since then there was a big doco also released on Netflix. So prosecutors in California are going to recommend that Eric and Lyle Menendez are resentenced. This is for the 1989 killing of their parents. How it works is that it's up to the court to decide whether they'll be resentenced, but the prosecutors are going to recommend that the brothers are resentenced to 50 years to life for those murders.
This is where I got confused because they're already sentenced to life, but...
Life without parole.
Life without parole.
Yeah.
So because they're under, and this is sort of the, the asterisk, because they were under 26 years old at the time of the crimes, what that means is the outcome of resentencing could mean that they're eligible for parole.
Immediately.
So people that are big supporters of them are saying this is a really good step because it could mean that they could be free.
Yeah, so they've been in prison for 34 years already with the prospect of staying in jail until they die. So a resentencing could see them out immediately, which would be a huge development. They've admitted to the murder of their parents, I guess it's important to say. The argument, though, and how it's all sort of bubbled to light and had this review, is that their advocates and them themselves say that the sexual abuse that they claim they were subject to at the hands of their parents wasn't ever properly considered. So that documentary on Netflix actually brought to light some new evidence which said that they did tell family members that they were abused before the murders. The insinuation was that they committed the murders and then they sort of concocted this story. So that's why the Attorney General says, I've seen it, I hear it, I reckon they should have another look at it.
Hence why it's also captivating.
Yeah.
I'm hooked now.
Okay.
And a timeline, just if you're wondering when and where how all this might happen, a timeline has yet to be set. Coming up this week, first up, expect it quite a bit in the papers today, if you haven't already read them, especially in the 9 papers about Qantas, about Alan Joyce, and if rumours are true about the Prime Minister.
So Joe Aston is at the heart of all of this.
Yeah.
Joe Aston, of course, he's left the Financial Review now, but he's got a book coming out next week called The Chairman's Lounge about Qantas and about Alan Joyce. If you followed that story, you'll know that Joe really was the guy who was pushing that story along a lot, and it saw ultimately Joyce leave the company a lot earlier than he was going to. That's being serialised, the book, across those 9 newspapers today.
Yeah, so that'll be a thing. And also, we actually have Joe Aston coming on News Club next week. The interview should be out next weekend for you to listen to. For a good portion of people listening, they'll be like, who's Joe Aston?
Yeah.
So we'll make sure we clarify that because you will see his name across the news a lot throughout next week. And for those of you who absolutely know who Joe Aston is, no doubt, you'll be interested to hear what he has to say about his book.
As we know, he's a whole vibe.
He's a whole thing. He is a whole thing. The US election, though, it's what? I'm looking at the date, 26th of October. It's like a week
Saturday
and a bit
night,
away.
Sunday, Monday,
10 days
Tuesday,
away,
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So like 10 sleeps until the election.
The big news across the next few days will be the fact that Donald Trump is sitting down to be interviewed by Joe Rogan, the biggest podcast in the world.
Yeah, the Joe Rogan Experience is his show. As podcast people, chances are you've come across it, if not had a listen to one of his 3 or 4 hour episodes. They're marathon.
I've never got through one.
No. But plenty have. He's
Yeah.
got a huge audience, particularly of younger men. So that's a good reason as they try and track down that vote.
Yeah.
Both Harris and Trump are looking to get more young men on their side and voting for them. So, yeah, as to whether the Harris campaign will go on, it's still a bit of a question mark, but there's been reports that she's thinking about them.
It's really interesting to me because she was on the Call Her Daddy podcast, which has a significant female audience, both of them talking to their base when it comes to the way that they're approaching podcasts, and whether Donald Trump will do Call Her Daddy and Kamala Harris will do Joe Rogan is very interesting. And I'm reminded again about the interview with Ben Smith that I did on News Club, where he said US politics is nothing like Australian politics. They've just got to firm up their base.
They've got to get out the vote.
And get them out to vote. Yeah. And it's just such a sort of a mind flip for us.
But this interesting part too of this campaign, that podcast has been such a huge part of it.
Yep.
Through the week I listened to Tim Walls, who was on Smartless.
Yeah, I haven't listened to that yet.
Interesting enough, but they're cheerleading for him. It's gushing over him and what a great guy he is. And, the former press sec in me is like, oh, Tim. He's talking about how old he is and how hopeless he is and how...
Really?
Oh, yeah, it's quite interesting. He's clearly just a fun guy.
Yeah, okay. See, and I mean, podcasts is a thing. Maybe I think let's make them a thing for the Australian election.
Well, and to balance that up, JD Vance did the interview on the New York Times. Which I really enjoyed. I thought that was a really interesting interview.
One of our recommendations this week, we may as well get ahead of it, is a bit of a read about the influence of podcasts and the rise of podcasts as a channel in this election. So I feel like a lot of people listening will be interested to read that. We'll put a link to that in your episode notes. On Sunday, the Women's Big Bash season kicked off. On Monday, the long-awaited shutdown of the 3G network is happening.
Yes, it's something that we even did a shortcut on, because 3G is a whole thing, particularly if you're in regional Australia, but also if you have a baby monitor, if you have all sorts of different technology streams, they work on 3G. So there was a delay in that shutdown because the issue was that not enough people had actually made the transition. There were still some critical networks on the 3G stream. So that's actually happening. Telstra and Optus, just check your phone, go to the website. There's a whole thing if you're worried about that.
There are some phones that just won't work if you don't have a 3G network. Not many. Yeah. So hopefully that's not that much of a big deal, but who knows, it could be. Coming up, also a few AGMs to point out. So BHP are on Wednesday, followed by Woolworths on Thursday. Big companies.
Yeah, Wesfarmers on Thursday as well, and JB Hi-Fi. So if you're a retail nerd, it's big day.
Great week.
Big day. Look, BHP, of course, and Woolies very much in focus because there's a big lawsuit that kicked off this week. It's about a dam collapse that happened in Brazil about 9 years ago, the Mariana Dam, or San Marco Dam. It's got a few names, but essentially it's Brazil's biggest environmental disaster. It collapsed 50 million cubic metres of toxic waste, flooded villages, people died, lots of damage to be cleaned up there. So it's the compensation claim of people who are affected by that.
Well, the point being that Samarco is part owned by BHP.
Yep.
Finally, wrapping up the week, Halloween is on Thursday night. I still don't know why Halloween exists. I look it up every year and I never remember. It's Celtic actually, I think, and it's about...
Pagan?
It's something about ghosts came out on that date and that people dressed up to scare them away or something. The point being, it's becoming a bigger and bigger and bigger thing in Australia.
Yeah, I thought it was just about lollies.
Well, it is, I guess. But anyway, so many houses around my area are all Halloweened up.
It's all Hallows Day. It's Christian, pagan, Celtic, blah, blahs. But, yeah, it's a whole thing.
I feel bad because I wanted to give you a proper explanation, but maybe if it becomes if it's still a big news story next week, I might give it a go next week. Squiz recommends, we've already recommended that article about podcasting and the influence it's having on the US election. What was that, a New York Times or it was a Wall Street, no, Washington Post?
Wasn't it Guardian?
Claire's looking it up as I speak.
I am.
Yeah, here we go. How long is it going to take her? Is it saved? Is it starred?
I've sent you a few articles
Is it
this week.
bookmarked?
I've sent you one about Donald Trump at Macca's. I've sent you a few.
yeah.
But yes, New York Times. Yeah.
Okay, so that article's in there. The other thing we wanted to point out is that we talked about it being Media Literacy Week. It's been a big week for us with the launch of Newshounds 2.0, the new and improved version. But we've also released a news consumption report, which talks to how you're feeling about your news consumption and how you're feeling particularly about mis and disinformation. This is born out of that survey we did a little while ago where we asked you a number of questions about, how concerned you are about this issue. We thought that maybe you'd be somewhat concerned. I think it was something like, I can't remember the stat now, but it's definitely in the 90%.
96,
96% of you said teaching the next generation of news consumers is a critical issue. 90% said mis and disinformation really concerns you. So really encouraging that you are concerned about this problem.
It is encouraging just from a broader perspective. I think we all should be a bit wary and worried about that. But really encouraging for us because, of course, we're putting a lot of effort into helping the next generation of kids become critical consumers of news and media and information. And it's something that we're very passionate about. So it's really great to know that our audience thinks the same and that hopefully we can help them too.
And the only other thing to add before we wrap up this episode is that there will be, obviously I mentioned the Joe Aston News Club episode will be out late next week. But next Wednesday, when we usually release our News Club episodes and our News Club interviews, I've got a conversation with Will Glasgow. He is the first and only journalist still allowed back into China. We talk a lot. I mean, China's been kind of like on the back burner, but it's a big news topic.
It's a big news topic and Will has some very unique insights into that. So looking forward to that.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Weekly Wrap. We'll be back next week.